Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're coming from. My name is Laura Burke-Hausman, and I am so happy to welcome you to today's webinar. In today's discussion, Unpacking a Looming Regional War, a conversation with Major General retired Amir Eshel, the American Society of the University of Haifa will speak with the former Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Defense and former commander of the country's Air Force. Major General Eshel will shed light on Israel's massive attack on Iran over the weekend, where some 140 Israeli aircrafts conducted strikes on missiles and drone bases and weapons production sites. Major General Eshel will break down what is now being called the Days of Repentance operation, how Iran may choose to respond, and how Israel arrived at its current fateful crossroads, where it is fighting a war on 7 fronts and defending itself on land, sea, and air. Major General Eshel, who was bestowed an honorary fellowship degree from University of Haifa on its 50th year anniversary, is one of the most knowledgeable experts who can discuss this topic, given that he had a front row seat as the 1982 and 2006 Lebanon wars and the Gaza conflicts in 2008, 2009, 2012, and 2014. As chief of the Ministry of Defense from 2020 to 2023, he led defense procurement, research, and development with Israel's defense industries and efforts to boost the nation's defense exports. He also led dramatic reform, helping those wounded in action to recover and rebuild their lives. On the diplomatic front, he led talks with the United States on a myriad of strategic cooperation issues. Today, he serves as a senior fellow for the Foundation Defense of Democracies. The webinar will be moderated by Dubi Weinglass, chair of the Executive Committee of the University of Haifa and former Director General of Israel's Prime Minister's Office under Ariel Sharon. Of course, we encourage viewers, like all of you at home, to participate in the discussion in the Q&A section that will be held at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions for Major General Eshel, for those joining us over Zoom, please submit your questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And for those watching over Facebook, you can leave your question in the comments section. And finally, if you are looking to give back to University of Haifa at this time, you can do so at asuh.org/donate. You'll also find this link included in the comment section and a QR code on the top right of your screens. This past month has seen University of Haifa students, faculty, and staff squarely in the line of fire along the northern front of Israel's multi-front war. While universities across Israel begin their new school year on November 3rd, the University of Haifa community will delay starting classes until November 10th under the continued threat of Hezbollah rocket attacks, facing the ever-present scenario of being forced to flee classrooms for bomb shelters within a matter of seconds. We at ASUH stand in solidarity with the University of Haifa's community as it navigates the start of yet another wartime academic year. We find ourselves physically in the United States, but of course, our hearts are in Haifa now and always. So without further ado, I would love to hand you over to Dubi to start our webinar.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. And, good afternoon in the United States. It's good evening in Israel. I'm very privileged to host today Major General Amir Eshel, whom I know for many years. And amongst his so many qualifications that Laura just went through, she forgot to mention that both we attended the same high school in Ramat Gan, although those 50 years difference in age between the two of us. But altogether, Major General Amir Eshel held the top positions in Israel defense system, firstly as a combat pilot, then as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, then as the head of the planning department of the IDF, later on as the commander-in-chief of the Israeli Air Force, and later, after he retired from the military, as Director General of the Ministry of Defense. So we couldn't pick anyone who has such a broad look and experience, understanding, which he gained in his long, eventful career, like Major General Eshel. And also, he is a graduate of Haifa University, where he made his second degree. So, Amir, thank you very much for joining us, and it's a pleasure to host you. Naturally, given that you are one of the founding fathers of the Israeli Air Force, we would like very much to hear about Israel's air operation in Iran. If kindly you can describe, of course, to the extent that the secrecy and field security laws may allow you, the modus operandi, how it was done, what was the dimension of the operation, what were the challenges, how these challenges and difficulties were met, and what are, to the best of your knowledge, the consequences of this operation?
Well, Dubi, first, thank you all. I think the answer is yes. Anyway, look, the Israeli airstrike in Iran is I would say, projected a unique capability of the Israeli Air Force. Third, being able to strike in such a long range against cutting-edge Russian technology and Iranian technology related to air defenses and other challenges that the pilots and the planners and the commanders had to address. First, why it was so complicated? It's far away. From Israel to Iran is to the targets. It's more than 1,500 kilometers, which is close to 800 miles, at least. Flying at night, formations, air refueling, have to go through several states without given a permission to fly above them. For example, Syria, Iraq. So how you deal with air threats and air defenses. And Laura mentioned a lot of the number of aircraft, were quite many. And it is a very, very complicated operation that was conducted brilliantly. So this is the first challenge, the challenge of the executors, the pilots, the aircrew, and the commanders. The second challenge is the intelligence. How you get the intel information, which is very precise, that you know after flying 1,500 kilometers or 2,000 kilometers, and you choose that target and not that target. The buildings look the same, the warehouses, the storage, whatever, because we had a very good intelligence. And this is not obvious to be able to collect such a precise information. And, some of the target, it was publicized, were kind of mixers that are used to build the engines of the ballistic missiles. So to choose from a huge sites, the specific targets all over Iran, and also the air defenses. Where are the air defenses assets? The S-300, which is the state-of-the-art Russian capability, and other air defense systems in center of Iran, northern part, southern part. This is quite a challenge, a big one from the intelligence wise. The third one is strategic, because this is not a secret that the US insists on Israel's right to defend itself and to retaliate. But I would say that there were a lot of discussions between the US administration and the Israeli government, what to do and what not to do. I'm not sure about that they agreed about everything, but strategically it was challenging. And not just because of the US, it's also the Sunni countries in the Gulf, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, even Qatar, and others like Jordan, Egypt, Israel need to conduct that operation also to look at the strategic level, to do the right thing first to defend ourselves, but also to calculate other factors related to other strategic players in the Middle East related to that operation. This was the first airstrike in Iran after 36 years. The last one was in 1988, and the war between Iran and Iraq. And that was the first time that the Iranians were hit by the air, by air force, air power. And that was a very challenging operation and very successful one.
In your view, what are the strategic consequences of this operation? Is the notion which is mentioned by many commentators in Israel that the Iranians actually are under open sky, they are vulnerable, they are exposed, and if it's true, it is a very significant threat over their national security and gives Israel many future opportunities. God forbid. I hope we won't need. What do you think on it?
Well, I'll start with the outcomes. The physical one. The physical outcomes of this strike were very successful. Many air defense systems, including those systems that I've mentioned, which are strategic assets, were destroyed. And also part of the Iranian industries that built the ballistic missiles also were hit significantly. And the outcomes of that is, first, Iran is almost totally exposed related to defense from aerial attacks in present time and in future time until they will recover if. And that is, I think, a significant, think about the mindset of the leaders in Iran, that they know that they are totally exposed. So the Israeli Air Force can fly there almost without any kind of challenges and can destroy whatever he wants anytime, everywhere. This is, it's got a strategic impact. The second thing is related to the manufacturing of those ballistic missiles. They have a lot of ballistic missiles, but I think that strike will slow them down building new ones, not forever, but this is a significant also outcome. If you ask me, I would like to talk about the outcomes of that airstrike, but to break it into two time frames. One is short term and medium and long term. In the short term, Iran is right now is facing a great dilemma. A great dilemma. What to do? What to do? They have four options. One is not to retaliate. The other one is to retaliate. It can be a massive retaliation, and it can be minor retaliation. The third option is to use the proxies to retaliate, or combination of proxies and Iranian forces. And the fourth one is to decide to get a breakthrough in their nuclear program. That can be also kind of a response to this aerial attack. So there are four options. I think that the last one related to this nuclear race, like the breakthrough with the material, whatever. Right now, I think it's less likely. They want to see who is going to win in the elections in the United States, etc., etc. They know that they are vulnerable right now. So I don't think that it's less likely. Relate to retaliation, we have to assume that it could be a significant one, and that's how we prepare ourselves. I believe that right now we have to look at the bigger picture, and I'll cover that in a minute. I think in the short term, even if they will decide to retaliate in some way, they have to calculate that first they are being totally exposed. The second thing is actually de facto they lost their two major proxies around Israel, Hezbollah and Hamas. And I think that right now they will try to, Iran could be considering maybe kind of a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, maybe with Hamas also, in order to let the proxies to recover. It will take a long, long time, but they think strategically. So maybe they are considering that. And there is here a window of opportunity for a kind of a big package, which I don't know to evaluate the chances about ending the war, limitations on export of terrorism, something related to the nuclear project, and decreasing maybe the sanctions on Iran. I don't know, that also can be an option. So this is for the short term. The long term, Iran won't be changed unless the regime will be toppled. There's no question about it. I don't see that regime changes to be more positive, cooperate, or whatever. And that's why I think that we need not just Israel. We need a big stick, a military stick, should be the last resort to use it, if it is needed, to do it all the way. But political pressure, economical pressure, judicial pressure, whatever, a lot of things in order to put pressure on the Iranian leadership to recalculate their vector. I think a lot of things have been changed along the last few months. Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and some others. And that might lead to a different situation. But I'm not naive. If the regime won't be toppled, it's a bad regime, evil one, and we should put the pressure in order to change it.
Thank you very much. Just maybe one clarification to one aspect that you have just mentioned about the probabilities of progressing the Iranian nuclear program. Is the fact that Iran is so exposed and so vulnerable will not be a discourage for them to go on with the nuclear program? Always, in Israel, the common belief is that practically we are helpless when it comes to deal with the Iranian nuclear problem, and we need the support or the assistance of other powers, mainly the United States. What happened recently shows that you can fly over Iran, and even if the plants of the industry is deep in the ground, but all the infrastructure around, whether it's power, whether it's water, whether the auxiliaries problem is very much vulnerable. Do you think it would encourage or maybe discourage the Iranians to go on with their program, with their nuclear program?
My personal thinking is that this is right now less likely because of a bigger picture than what Israel can do or not. It's also this changes in the US administration after the elections, etc. everything should be calculated by them, of course. They are not, they watch everything very carefully. I would say that they have to calculate that, yeah, Israel is determined. Israel has the capacity and the will if it is needed. And of course, if Iran will decide to make this breakthrough, we should operate. We should strike. And we are not helpless. It's very challenging. There are smart people. They have learned from other cases in the past how to make their nuclear project to be very robust. And so, but, we've been planning and training for many, many, many years. And so we are not helpless, even though it's very challenging. So I think right now it's if you consider the four options that I've mentioned about their response, I think kind of an immediate breakthrough, I think it's less likely. But we should prepare for that.
Thank you. I would like to go to cover with you now a less successful topic, which is the October 7 catastrophe. By the way, this is an episode we will learn to live with, how a military that in the recent day have shown himself with such splendid operations like the Iranian attack, like this issue of the beepers and the other of them, have failed so bitterly on October 7. Given your very rich experience and knowledge of the military in the variety of positions that you have held, what's your explanation? How you explain the omission, the negligence, or this blunder that happened? What happened, militarily speaking, on October 7th?
It's October 7th. It's a total failure of the whole chain. It's not as kind of a single factor or whatever that actually failed. The whole system failed. From the political leadership to the military, and the military, I count the intelligence and the operations, everything. It's total failure. And I even can't explain to myself why it happened. Why it happened. I can right now, I will say a few words, but even though maybe I understand and know some information, but none of us can explain how this catastrophic failure happened without even a single, part of the chain that functioned in the way it should have functioned. So first, in the strategic level, this is the political leadership. I don't want to go into politics, but Hamas enjoyed support that was approved by Israel, money, even our refusal to decapitate his leadership years before, and we could do that. And the money that was poured to Hamas by Qatar, approved by Israel, and help them to build their, or to enhance their military capabilities, this is a big mistake. The second part is the intelligence. This is a basic, not basic, it's fundamental mistake, understanding Hamas's intentions. Totally missed. Totally missed. We thought Hamas is deterred. Hamas is willing to find or to boost the Gaza Strip economy, etc. Totally, as we say in football, offside. We were not even close to what they intended to do. And I can tell you that people say that because of the demonstrations in Israel after establishing the new government, Netanyahu's government, in the end of December 2022, those Hamas and others said, well, they thought that they had an opportunity, Israel is vulnerable, etc. We know from authentic documentation of Hamas that Sinwar wanted to initiate the invasion in 2022, a year before, more than a year before. So it gives you the idea how we were offset from his intentions. The third element that failed is the operational apparatus of the IDF. I think that was undermining Hamas capacity. Not just will, capacity. And we had the plan, the October 7th plan of Hamas in our hand a year and a half before October 7th. Exactly the plan. But I think a lot of people in the intelligence and the operational apparatus of the IDF didn't believe that capacity is possible. So it was disrespect for that enemy. Second thing was by IDF is to be based on new technologies. They said technologies will give us the advantage that kind of thing won't happen. Also, one of the top leaders of IDF said that we can't be surprised. We have a very good intelligence. We will know we failed. And there were two, I would say, few forces or units around Gaza Strip in October 7, because it was a holiday, and there were very, very few units. So that gives you the chain of failure from the political leadership to the intelligence and the operational forces of the IDF. So it's combined, and it's a total failure, tragic one.
Thank you. I would like to cover with you the current status of the war as we speak now. In your opinion, in what respect the military accomplished its goals in this war? In what respect it didn't? What was gained politically, militarily, and how into these whole complexities you combine the hostage issue, which simply tears the Israeli society into pieces, that became such a painful, bleeding issue in the Israeli public body.
Yeah, I want to talk about achievements and failures, which is political level and the military combined. First, we have to refer to the objectives of the war that were defined by the government. It is to eliminate Hamas infrastructure, the military one. I would say that has been achieved. Hamas was hit significantly and dramatically, but this is not that the last terrorist is gone and the last AK-47 was exploded. No. their ability to conduct that kind of invasion and to do other stuff with rockets, whatever, had been reduced dramatically. But it can't be zeroized. So it's partial achievement. The second objective was to remove Hamas regime. Hamas regime has been hit also hardly, but Hamas is there. Sinwar was killed, others were killed, but they have others that can conduct the life or to control Gaza, not in the way that they had before. So it's also partial right now. But I don't want you to undermine the achievements because they are very, very high. About Hamas military capacity, about the leadership. But if people think that this is kind of a knockout in a boxing competition, that somebody count to 10 and the guy is on the ground and can't stand up, this won't happen. This is terror organization. It's a different ballgame from fighting states or countries. Another thing was an objective that was added after the war had started, is to bring back the hostages. Less than 50% were brought in a deal, and the rest are there, live or dead. And I'll speak about that, Dubi, in a minute. And there was another objective that was added. It was about the northern border, to bring back the citizens of Israel to their homes along the Lebanese border. Nothing happened. Total failure up till now. Relate to the military, significant achievements. I think that achievements will be learned all over the world related to how to fight terrorism. And not just terrorism, because you can compare the Israeli war here with other campaigns in Iraq, in Afghanistan, which have a lot of similarities. But here, nobody ever fought in that kind of arena, that the most of it was above the ground, but mainly was underground in a dense urban areas. Nobody fought such a war up till now. And I think that our ground forces, the Air Force, combining together, those kind of things will be learned all over the military schools and the strategic institutes, how to conduct a war. It's not just a terrorist organization. It's a kind of a semi-military organizations that have, I would say, technologies, capacity like countries have. So they are significant. But the military option is a kind, if you look at that as a kind of a train with coaches. So, all right, the military operation is the first coach. It's not the locomotive, but it's the first. But the second one should be the political one. And here there is a vacuum. There is a vacuum, unfortunately, because you know what are the 4 questions that you ask yourself before you go to a war or a big campaign? You ask yourself 4 questions, and you have to answer those. One is, what do you want to achieve? The second is it achievable? Not everything can be achieved. The third is, what's going to be the price? And the fourth, what is the exit strategy? This war, which is unbelievable, which is more than a year.
The longest one ever been.
The longest one ever been.
Longer than independence, by the way.
You're right. And the first one it was, I would say, restricted to think about the exit strategy, about the day after. So how can you fight when you don't know what do you want at the day after? Because if you want A or you want Z, it's a different type of fighting. And there isn't any strategy, and we pay high price for that. Because when we will start, if to think about the day after, it will take a very long time. A very long time. So what are we going to do during that period of time? Continue to fight. And the price relate to human lives. The price of Israel's status or position in the world, strategically, which is unprecedented low. We are under embargo of arms supplies from almost all the countries in the world, except the United States. And even the United States doesn't supply us everything. And of course, the International Criminal Court and many other things. These are, yeah. And so these are, of course, prices that we pay and we continue to pay. And Dubi knows, at the 6 a.m. in the morning, they publicize the new names that were killed the day before. And it goes every day. And I'm asking myself, sometimes you have to sacrifice, we understand it. But what gonna be at the day after? What do we want? I don't know what Israel wants. I don't know. And it was totally restricted to deal with that by the prime minister. First time ever that I hear of, and I served in several wars and also in positions during campaigns and wars. From day one, you start to work on the political end state solution and end state. And here, it's kind of an open circle. The second thing, which is really hard-tearing, is the hostages. The hostages. And in a minute, I would get into that because I think this is a moral issue even more. What we have up to now, there is another thing that was besides of the prices, another thing that actually we have missed is normalization with Saudi Arabia. And it was almost kind of a hallway to that. Okay, there is a war, but there was an engagement between the US administration, Saudis and us, whatever. Right now, it's not on the table. It's not on the table, and strategically it's very important. If we will continue in the current vector of the war, this is kind of a war of attrition. All the achievement, not all, many of the previous achievements will be eroded. And it will be more challenging to initiate a positive political efforts. And now I want to talk about the hostages. Look, it's beyond everything. I'll tell you why. October 7 was catastrophic. The major thing that I think it hurt the heart, the core of Israel's essence, that kind of thing won't happen never, ever again. People were picked from the beds, were killed, kidnapped. The state of Israel was that won't happen forever. And we failed. And they are the hostages. They are paying the price. If we will not make moves to release them, and unfortunately, I think a lot of them have been already dead. The identity of Israel actually will be changed. Because we are Jews, it's part of our tradition. Pidyon Shvuim. It's to release hostages, POWs. Of course, that we were responsible for that. This was part of our identity card. And now it will change the whole thing if they won't be released. That will be very, very tragic, not just for them, for the identity of the state of Israel.
Well, it's very clear, but it's part of this complexity since our government, to be more precise, the one who chaired the government, has no interest, and I'm speaking about a political interest, to bring an end to this war. So all arrangements which are necessary to bring the hostages, like a ceasefire, like a certain withdrawal from Gaza, like a ceasefire in Hezbollah, are avoided. And this vicious circle goes on and seems to drag. It became an open-ended war, but I'm afraid we are short of time to go into it, maybe in one of our next meetings. So I would like very much to thank you for this incredibly interesting information that you have shared with us. And now we will ask Laura to address the questions of our participants.
Yes, and thank you both very much. This has been incredible. We have so many questions coming in, so I'm going to try to get to as many as possible. But let's start with this one. I think this kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. In your opinion, what does Israel need to change in its strategy in order to gain more international support and win the information war, which it's arguably losing?
Well, there isn't any single or sole answer for that, but I think that there is a clear path, which is very challenging in order to achieve also what you have mentioned, Laura. We need to release the hostages to reach a ceasefire and withdrawal from Gaza, maintaining our right to defend ourselves, because if Hamas will do other things, we will attack again. And the same thing with Hezbollah, normalization with Saudi Arabia, regain international community support, regain US bipartisan support. I think it's important for the state, for the national security of the state of Israel. It's not being nice to others. It's part of our national security strategy. So I think the end of the war, and the key for that is releasing the hostages, and we're going to pay a very painful price, but it's worth.
Yeah.
And if I may add to it a broader,
please.
Israel must sooner or later engage in a political process with the Palestinians to find a sort of a political solution to this ongoing occupation, which lasts over 70 years. And that, I believe, would bring us back, or would bring back the world support. This ongoing status of occupation, this is axiomatically the source for the friction between us and the rest of the world. I mean, broadly speaking.
Right. Absolutely. I hear that completely. And I'm also wondering, and this is a question somebody had that I've been curious about as well. Do you believe that the ongoing tensions between Israel and Iran will eventually lead to political upheaval within Iran? Do you think we're already seeing that? What is your take on that?
It's hard to answer that because you can look at that from two different perspectives. Ongoing exchanging, for example, punches in this 1,500 kilometers distance might drive part of the Iranian society, I don't know, to do something against the regime, and it might do the opposite way, to unite them, to unite them. So I don't think that kind of thing is not in the interest of Israel and not in the interest of Iran. In order to topple the regime, you need to do other things.
Economically.
Not just economically. It's also it's wider than that. But you're right, Dubi. Things that will force them, and we've seen Iranians are quite sensitive to those kind of things. And if can be the international community or part of the international community can create kind of a coalition and initiate such an effort, I think it's got a lot of chances that, I don't know when, a year, 2 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years, but it's worth.
Absolutely. And speaking about Iran, someone else had a question. How long do you think it will take Iran to develop a nuclear weapon? And what will Israel do to avoid this becoming a reality?
Well, I'm going to use General Milley words after he retired. Or I think it was even before. He said that we know that if they want to make a progress in the project, there are two major things that they have to do. First is to enrich the uranium to the level of 90%, which is a military enrichment. They can do it quite fast, weeks. Second is weaponizing. Weaponizing, it takes longer time, but this is not, we don't talk about years. It's less. It's less. Milley said that maybe it's less than a year. Israel prepared itself, has been prepared itself for many years in order to address an attempt of Iran to move forward and to go to that breakthrough. That would be a dramatic strategic change. And we have to assume that it might happen, and the Israeli military should be prepared for that situation and to be effective. And I don't know if other countries will be involved or not. We have to defend ourselves. Nuclear Iran is unacceptable.
But there's also, there is an additional school who believes that the Iranian play a game of brinkmanship, namely, they will get as close as possible to weaponizing their nuclear capabilities, but they will not take the final step, because that helps them to cash the threat in a better way, to blackmail the rest of the world, and yet not to jeopardize themselves in either military or economic sanctions. Because you see, when I was in the government, which is almost 20 years ago, then the evaluation were that Iran needs, then they talk about between 3 to 5 years to be a nuclear power. Those 3 to 5 years already lapsed 4 times. So it's a sort of an hold me game, which I would say this is the more optimistic approach to the issue.
But I want to add to that, and you're right, Ubi, a lot of other factors had impact on their decisions not to do. They want to be based in the threshold of having nuclear capability to collect the price and whatever. If the regime, and that's if, right now I don't think that they feel like that, but if the regime, the Iranian regime, will feel that it might be toppled by somebody, doesn't matter whom, they might make the breakthrough. I tell you why. Lesson learned from the Arab Spring, lesson learned from North Korea, whatever. A regime that has a nuclear capability is totally immune from external strikes and threats, whatever. It can be, of course, it will face sanctions, crippling sanctions, etc., etc. They have to calculate it. But if the regime thinks only about himself,
Right.
he might go to be nuclear. They think that Gaddafi made a big mistake giving up his nuclear program, and that's how he ended his life.
But most probably, the end of the current regime in Iran will happen domestically. It will be an outcome of internal pressures.
Yeah, I hope.
Well, let's talk about Russia for a second. So Russia has previously acknowledged in support of Iran and even tried to deter Israel in their most recent attack. So how important is their role in the ongoing escalation between Israel and Iran, and what can we expect there?
The Russians are present in the Middle East physically since 2015. Now things have been changed due to the war in Ukraine because they are stretched first, but they have a new ally, which is Iran, that supply them with UAVs, ballistic missiles, etc. Russia can do, or I would say they have the ability to disrupt Israel or militarily. But we haven't seen such a behavior because I think they respect the Israeli military. They know that we can defeat their capabilities. And I don't think that they want to initiate another front besides Ukraine. I don't think that this is not in their interests. They need the supply from Iran, so they, in a way, back up Iran, but not to the extent of being physically involved.
And if I may add to it, the Russians have a very significant presence in Syria. It could take the Russians 2 minutes to declare Syria sky as a non-flight zone, and that might bring the end of our ability of an aerial control over Syria, and they have not done it. It goes as well to these very well advanced anti-air defense system of the SR-400 that they did not supply. The reason is, on top of interest and politics and diplomacy, something which I have learned during my time in the government, you cannot suspect Putin in any sort of moral consideration. But having said that, he still, or at least he had, a soft point towards the Russian diaspora in Israel. Don't forget that the Russian diaspora in Israel is the second largest Russian diaspora in the world.
Right. That's right.
And Russia is very keen to maintain close relationship, cultural and otherwise, with the large, formerly Russian community in Israel. And once he told us, when we visited the Kremlin, myself and late Ariel Sharon, that he is very much aware that amongst those almost 2 million formerly Russians who migrated to Israel, he said there are at least 5,000 war heroes from the Great Patriotic War, otherwise known as Second World War, which is a war which still a major factor in the Russian soul and the Russian mentality. So the idea that his weaponry or hostilities initiated by him may jeopardize the life of Russian war heroes, still, or at least I'm speaking the past, bother him.
Interesting point. We actually only have time for one more question, so I guess this is a great one to wrap up here. Amir, you earned your degree from the University of Haifa's National Security Studies Center. in some sort of positive way, what do you remember about your time in Haifa? And also, what message do you have for the residents of the northern city of Haifa, whose lives are completely in limbo due to the war with Hezbollah?
Well, this is kind of a bit normal, this limbo, which is, we can accept it. We can accept it. And we need to change the course of the war, and we've talked about it. My memories from studying in the Haifa University are very positive. For me, it was after being a squadron commander as a lieutenant colonel, before being the head of operations of the Israeli Air Force. I studied in Haifa. And of course, it opened my eyes, widened my thinking in a way that I've used those tools. It's a long time ago, yeah, but those tools still serve me right now. And I think that I'm highly appreciated about that unique program that I've attended. And I would say that built part of my capabilities, being the responsible for strategy in the IDF, being the commander of the Air Force, and then the Director General of the Ministry of Defense. I've gained there a lot of tools and of course, new ways to look at things. Because as a military guy, there is a joke, but it's not a joke, that you look through the gun sight. That's what you do. So if you look through the gun sight, everybody that you are looking at is an enemy. But wait a minute, the world is much wider than that. The spectrum, and the University of Haifa has an added value to my broad perspectives, and I'm highly appreciated, and I feel lucky to be a graduate of Haifa University.
Okay, and I think, Laura, we should quit while you are on top. So
I think that's a great idea.
So again, we are privileged having you here tonight, and I think not just on behalf of everybody of Israel who is around here, to thank you time and again for these incredible contributions that you've given to Israel defense and Israel's life. And to our viewers, again, thank you very much for everybody for gathering here tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much to Dubi, to you, and to Major General Eshel. This was really wonderful. And of course, again, thank you to everyone who joined us today. I apologize. We weren't able to get to all the questions that everyone had. There were so many wonderful questions. So if anyone has any further questions they'd like to ask, please feel free to send them to us. Email info@asuh.org, and we'll get that over to Dubi and Amir. So again, thank you once again for your participation, for your support, and we hope to see you on the next webinar.